The thought of a peaceful weekend alone sounded appealing, but solitude can be a double-edged sword. In the right conditions, it morphs into a sinister force, amplifying every creak, shadow, and whisper. I wasn't prepared for what would transpire during those few days when my boyfriend was away. What started as a quiet evening with friends quickly descended into a nightmare that still haunts me. I live with my boyfriend M in a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. The block we live on is tucked away, offering privacy and a sense of safety. The street curves slightly and our house sits in a position where no neighboring homes directly face us. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath single-story home with a basement, nothing extravagant, but comfortable and located in a town with low violent crime rates. Last October, M went to Las Vegas for a bachelor party, leaving me alone from Thursday to Monday. At first, I was excited to have the house to myself. On Friday evening, I invited a few girlfriends over for a wine night. We had a great time watching scary movies and catching up. The living room was filled with laughter and the occasional shriek during the more intense movie scenes. It was around 10:30 p.m. when the doorbell rang, cutting through our laughter like a knife. We all froze and exchanged uneasy glances. The timing was unnerving given we were immersed in horror films. Quietly, I crept to the door, peeking through the small glass panel at the top. Despite the cars in the driveway making it clear the house wasn't empty, there was no one on the porch. My heart raced as I went back to my friends, trying to downplay the situation. We convinced ourselves it was just a cruelly timed prank, a ding-dong ditch. After everyone left around midnight, I locked up and went to bed. Sleep came quickly, but it didn't last long. At 1 a.m., the doorbell rang again, this time accompanied by 2 sharp knocks. Adrenaline surged through me as I grabbed my phone and called M. He answered, clearly drunk, and I could hear the loud hum of a bar in the background. I explained what was happening, and he told me to stay in the bedroom and not open the door for anyone. He didn't suggest calling the police, so I refrained, trying to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. As I lay in bed, my heart began to calm. But just as I was about to drift off, I heard a faint clicking noise outside. My stomach churned as the sound grew louder, then stopped abruptly. A knock on the bedroom window followed, and a male voice called out, "Hey, anyone home? I need some help." My breath hitched. The blinds were closed, shielding me from whoever was outside, but it also meant they couldn't see me either, or so I hoped. "I know you're home," the voice said, the tone now darker and more insistent. Panic set in, and I dialed 911, whispering to the operator as I reported someone trying to break into my house. They assured me officers were on the way. Every second felt like an eternity. The man's presence outside never wavered. I didn't hear footsteps or rustling to suggest he'd left. When the doorbell rang again, this time followed by louder, more authoritative knocks, I nearly screamed. A voice announced, "It's the police." Still wary, I peeked through the glass panel and saw 2 officers. Relieved but still shaken, I opened the door. The taller officer immediately stepped inside, his demeanor gruff and dismissive. He demanded details I didn't have and seemed irritated when I couldn't provide a description of the man. "Well, you called us," he snapped. "If you don't want our help, we can leave." His words stung, and I felt tears welling up. His partner, silent and stoic, looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. The officers did a quick, half-hearted search of the property, then told me there was nothing they could do without cameras or evidence of a crime. They left, and I was more terrified than ever, knowing the man outside could still be lurking. I stayed up the rest of the night, jumping at every sound. When daylight finally broke, I felt a small measure of relief. I went about my Saturday as planned, helping a friend set up for her Halloween party that evening. The party was a welcome distraction, filled with laughter and a sense of normalcy. I stayed until after 1 a.m., then drove home, exhausted but sober. The moment I stepped into the house, I noticed something was off. A cool draft greeted me, and my eyes were immediately drawn to an open window in the living room. Confused, I shut it, racking my brain to remember if I'd opened it earlier. As I moved towards the bathroom to brush my teeth, I noticed the basement door was ajar. My pulse quickened. The basement was always closed. I was meticulous about it. Gathering every ounce of courage, I walked to the top of the stairs and froze. A faint clicking sound emanated from below, rhythmic and deliberate. My breath caught in my throat as the noise abruptly stopped. Then, a voice from the darkness, "You're finally home." The sheer terror of that moment overwhelmed me. Slamming the door shut, I ran outside, clutching my phone. I banged on my neighbor's door, and he groggily answered. Together we called the police. When the same two officers arrived, the taller one's attitude had softened slightly, perhaps because my neighbor stood by my side, corroborating my fear. This time the officers searched the house more thoroughly. I stood in the living room, trembling, while they inspected every nook and cranny. The basement, the attic, the closets, everything was checked. They found no sign of anyone. Reluctantly, they left, advising me to lock up better next time. That night, I packed a bag and stayed with my sister until Em returned home. For weeks afterward, I couldn't be alone in the house. Every noise made my heart race. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Though no one has returned, the memory of that weekend lingers, a constant reminder of how fragile our sense of security can be. The experience taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Always lock your windows and doors, no matter how safe you think your neighborhood is. To this day, I still wake from nightmares of knocking on the window and a voice whispering from the dark. Even surrounded by loved ones, I'm haunted by the feeling of being watched, and I may never fully escape the fear that gripped me that weekend.